What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of New Orleans Basketball. I'm your host, Raphael Rattler, breaking down last night's New Orleans Pelicans road loss 103-111 to the Dallas Mavericks. The Pelicans have been experimenting with starting bigger lineups as of late, depending on the matchup. Last night, they went with the starting lineup CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, Zion Williamson, Kelly Olynyk as he makes his Pelicans debut, and Yves Missi at the 5. The Pelicans have really struggled all season in rebounding. They felt like the little brother in a lot of games. Willie Green has mentioned it. The players have mentioned it. It's been a struggle all season. So it doesn't surprise me that they tried something different, especially versus a Mavericks team that was playing without the majority of their rotational bigs. The Pelicans are going to need to lean on this to see if they can find something that works for them going into the offseason and see what moves they need to make to help out in this area. You also look at the landscape of the West, and front courts are just getting bigger. Minnesota, obviously, OKC, what they did in the offseason with Isaiah Hartenstein and now Chet returning from injury. Dallas, when they're healthy. Denver with the best player in the world. And, of course, Memphis with Zach Edey and Jaren Jackson Jr. The Pelicans are not going to be able to afford to play smaller and get out-rebounded regardless of what they do moving forward in the future. So I think experiment with these big lineups gives them a different looks to see if they can find more answers to the test. As far as the story of the game, it was a good game and a close game throughout. There were some positives for the Pelicans, even though they lost. They won on the boards, 53-47, out-rebounding the Mavericks in this area, even without all the key players that were missing from the Mavericks due to injury. They also dominated the paint, outscoring the Pelicans 56-36 in points in the paint. The mission, the strategy was obvious in this one. Zion Williamson had it on his mind from the beginning of the game. They were going to get to the rim at will, and they were going to get into the rim consistently, and that's what they set out to do. They played to their advantages, which, again, has not always been a given for this Pelicans team. Now, of course, the Pelicans didn't win the game. A lot of it had to do with the off-shooting night, really team-wide. The Pelicans shot just 41% from the field. Only 3 players in double figures, with Zion Williamson with 25, Trey Murphy with 20 points, and CJ McCollum with 16 points. But the biggest thing that stands out to me, there was only 25 assists, and the ball stuck in players' hands. And you could see coming out the break that the ball fluidity just wasn't there. There was too many possessions when the ball would be kicked out and be dribbled for 10 seconds in isolation, and then you'd be forced to throw a bad shot up at the end of the buzzer. And the Pelicans have just seen too much of that. And so a lot of what you'll be looking for in these next 26 games is how much chemistry and how much ball movement can they have on a consistent basis night in and night out. Because this is something that plagued this team, that even though the Dallas Mavericks have been playing phenomenally on the defensive end, despite all the injuries, this has been a problem for the Pelicans all season long, where there's too many times throughout the game when Zion's not on the court or Brandon Ingram wasn't on the court where the ball just stuck and stopped. And so this is going to be something that look for and you notice for the remainder of this season. The other biggest deficit was obviously the one that has plagued the Pelicans the most. It was the downfall at the three-point line. The Pelicans only shot 9 of 27, just 30% from the three-point line, while the Mavs shot 16 for 44 at 36%. The Pelicans were toppled by 21% in the three-point differential, and that's just not going to win you very many games in today's NBA. The same looks from three just weren't available this game. And it was obvious that the Pelicans wanted to go inside, but there were way too many contested way too many end of the shot clock threes, and way too many misses, even from the open threes that the Pelicans did get. Trey Murphy and CJ McCollum combined and scored most of the three-point attempts and most of the three-point makes, making 6 of the 9 3-points made and shooting 16 of the 27 that the Pelicans took in entirety. This is just not the formula for winning in today's NBA. And one of those things, and one of the people that the Pelicans relied on and hoping was going to give them power from the three-point line, was Jordan Hawkins. He struggled all season, and he struggled again last night, going just 1 of 7 from the field. He's only shooting 33% from the three-point line this season. David Griffin has talked about, Willie Green has talked about, Jordan Hawkins is someone that the Pelicans plan to invest in moving forward. He may be a CJ McCollum replacement at some point, but he's got to string together after having the back injury and the illness earlier this year. He's got to string together some consistent, efficient nights that he just hasn't been able to do, and he hasn't been able to gather a rhythm all season long. He will be an interesting player to watch the remainder of the season because he needs to factor in to what the Pelicans do moving forward. Now, someone who did not struggle in this game at all was Zion Williamson. Zion was absolutely unstoppable. The only thing that stopped him probably was the minutes restriction. He has 29 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. He had more points than minutes in the last 8 of 10 games. He was 11-15 from the field, shooting 75% from the field, which you could have seen coming with the Mavericks' lack of size in yesterday's game. Now, an area that he needs to improve on, he got to the line 11 times and made 7 of those attempts. This is something that I think comes with rhythm. Again, the more that Zion's on the court, the more fluid his free throw shooting looks. You could tell after missing a couple in the row early in the game, he got into a rhythm. This is something that Zion's going to need to improve on. You've seen this with the struggles of Giannis and Shaq in the past, where guys that get to the free throw line consistently every single night struggle in that area. I actually think that this is an area that Zion can stand to improve on and will improve on the more that he's on the court. Now, an area that he's already improved on is his on-ball defense. He had some really good moments in isolation versus Kyrie Irving, where he not only stood his ground, but he's been able to make an impactful defensive play and force the ball somewhere else. He also had a steal in this one. He had a couple blocks taken away due to fouls and things like that. This is something that Zion's been showing basically since the calendar year turned in 2025. This is the element to this team that the team is going to need. A lot of the games, not this one, but a lot of the games that the Pelicans have struggled with so far this season because they haven't been able to get stops. And Zion's not been the reason for that. And last night's performance, both on the offensive end and the defensive end, you could see that Zion's just in a different mode right now. He's playing the best basketball of his career, even on a minutes restriction. So let's talk about that minutes restriction. So Zion has been frustrated, and you've seen him talk about it in interviews. You've seen him talk about it after games. Seen him talk about it in practice. Last night, after getting going a couple of times in the second and getting going in the fourth, he was put on the bench, and he was visibly frustrated. Now, again, the Pelicans are in an interesting spot where it's probably in their best interest not to win games, but you still want to see this young group put something together, build some type of chemistry, figure out some things heading into a very, very pivotal offseason. So playing Zion, even this reduced amount of minutes, still allows him to get some chemistry with Trey Murphy, which I think is probably the most important development for the remainder of the season. It still allows the fans to see Zion. Again, there were a lot of people in the arena, and I heard a lot of conversations of people saying Zion's playing. I've never gotten to see Zion, even in an opponent's turf. And that's something that's important not only to the Pelicans, but important to the NBA and things like that as well. You allowed him to build chemistry with the other players, the other young guys on this roster that are learning to play off him solely for the first time in their careers in some respects. And so, again, it's a thing that you're going to have to watch all season long. Zion's saying all the right things. His body language is saying something else. He's saying that he's bought into the Pelicans plan, and probably a smart one altogether. But the frustration of a superstar in the NBA, when's the last time you heard that story end? So it'll be something to watch for as the season continues on. So another thing that I mentioned in terms of things that need to grow and in terms of things that you want to see flourish is the Trey Murphy and Zion Williamson two-man game. The first play of the game was an assist from Zion to Trey Murphy. Two of the 3 Zion assists went to Trey Murphy. And this is something that, again, if there's anything you're looking for over the remaining 26 games in the Pelican season this season, is how these two grow off one another. The knock on Brandon Ingram and Zion was that they like to operate in the same spaces, and that caused from caused conflict, and that caused from questions in terms of, is this pairing working together? Or Zion and Trey Murphy's games just work so well in tangent together. And so with those two guys being in action, you saw several after timeout plays being corrected and going to those two, and you saw good results from that. That's what you want to watch for the remainder of the year, how those two can build chemistry off one another and continue to grow as a pairing moving forward for this Pelicans roster. Now, a player who made his first start as a Pelican and first debut as a Pelican was Kelly Olynyk. Now, wasn't the greatest showing. He had 4 points, 3 assists, three rebounds, nothing to jump off the page for. He looked out of rhythm. He looked like a player who was playing his first game with the new team. The spacing was poor at times, where he was in spots where he probably shouldn't have been, because he's learning where his teammates like to be and like to operate on the floor. Kelly Olynyk is a super smart player, and so I expect these teams to get better as he gets more and more games underneath his belt. But it's very interesting to watch, and you could see some of the positives kind of jump off the page for him in terms of what he can be next to Zion, the crafty moves on offense, the helping out on the boards, and not just the individual rebounds themselves, but the boxing out and the tip outs so that other players on the Pelicans roster could get the rebounds. You saw some of that in his court IQ last night in the Mavericks loss. The other aspect is that he just offers something different from Yves Missi. The Pelicans have been looking for a floor spacing center to put around Zion since Zion walked into the doors. And the thought of Kelly Olynyk has always been intriguing next to a Zion Williamson because of their games, again, playing well off one another. It'll be interesting to see. He has 1 year left on his contract after this. But the idea of Kelly Olynyk is very, very, very curious for me as the Pelicans wrap up these next 26 games. Now, another player who might benefit with a similar type of game as Kelly Olynyk is Carlo Makovich. He's really coming along in his rookie season. 9 points, 5 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 block last night. He had a scary fall on a key and 1 dunk that really showed off his athleticism that he's been showing pretty consistently for some time now. He's averaging 2 blocks a game in February, and the more and more that he gets on the court, the more confident that you're seeing him become. He's shown out in the G League. He's shown out overseas, and his skill set is very interesting based off what this roster needs. He's a big who can space the floor, but he also shows his athleticism via blocks, via dunks, via putbacks in different ways. And so what you want to see out of him is just more confidence when he plays. There's lots of times where he hesitates offensively when he should just attack the mismatch that he has, because a lot of times he gets switched onto smaller players. I look to see this grow. Again, the Pelicans are probably not making the playoffs at this point. And so developments in players like Carlo Makovich are going to be important to monitor as the season wraps out. So another Pelicans loss to the Dallas Mavericks. It seems like the same old story. The game stays close. They lose at the end. But is this the best outcome? Zion plays well, Zion sits down, and the game changes. Zion, they bring Zion back into the game. Zion sits down, and the game changes. Zion's back late in the game. Maybe they get close and they have a shot, but most likely the Pelicans lose. Again, you want to see more and more Zion on the court, but at the same time, the Pelicans aren't playing for a whole lot this season. In fact, they're probably playing more for a top draft pick in a loaded class than they are for meaningless wins at this point the remainder of the season. But you need to see Zion on the court in some capacity. The capacity you've seen has been incredible, and fans want more of it. But at the same time, this might be what's smart for the team. So the Pelicans are back at home in the Smokey King Center on Sunday after a long break away at 6 p.m. With all that being said, that's all we got for you this week. Tune in.